Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be featuring a ship that I've only featured once on my YouTube channel, and that was back when it was in the work in progress stage, back when we still could review ships in the work in progress stage, and that is the Siliwangi. That name never ceases to make me smile. The matchmaking is brutal. They have both the Moskva and a Tallinn, two radar cruisers, Tallinn being able to stealth radar. They also have, well, it's tier 8 to tier 10, and they have a Benson, and they have an Ognavoy, and more importantly, they have a Holland as well. Siliwangi is a weird ship. The health pool is decent, but the DPM of this ship is absolutely brutally terrible. The HE DPM of the Siliwangi is 91k HE DPM. In comparison, the T61, a German tier 6, has 90k HE DPM. Generally speaking, pretty much everyone your own tier, DD or otherwise, is going to outgun you. If they're higher tier, they're almost guaranteed going to outgun you. That is just the life of this ship. However, the torpedoes are strong. Now, the gimmick of this, much like with the Loyang, is of course that you have access to that same 5.5 km hydro. Your concealment is 5.9, so in order to actually effectively use the hydro, you often have to put yourself in a very vulnerable position. And as mentioned, even though your health is decent, your HE DPM is dreadful. So anytime you actually pick a fight with any DD that is the same tier or higher, you want to be trying to use your consumables to your advantage, because the DPM advantage is always going to be against you. Luckily, you do have access to the Pan-Asian smokes. Unlike the Loyang that has those long duration American smokes, you have access to Pan-Asian smokes. You also have another advantage. Loyang is Siliwangi is stupidly rare. The Tallinn Pop's radar behind me. I call target on the Ognavoy, trying to get my team to shoot. I'm not too interested in taking a shot myself yet. Only when I've gotten as close as possible do I take a shot. And now, considering the long duration of the bloom of the smoke, it's almost, what, 30 seconds? I'm going to use that smoke to reverse and close the distance with this Ognavoy, trying to catch him in my hydro, trying to take advantage of this consumable combination that I have. At the same time, while trying to avoid any potential radars and such. And the Benson is also entering the smoke, so I know there is a potential here that I might catch both DDs, which would be a huge advantage for my team. I do catch one of them, and more importantly, this is the advantage that I spoke of, that the Siliwangi has. And that's the fact that this ship is insanely rare. This ship came out in, what, January this year? The Orkan came out, what, in the end of March? Something like at late March is when the Orkan came out. So a ship that came out later, and the Orkan is not a particularly popular ship either, but even then on the EU server the Orkan has over 60,000 battles. In comparison, the Siliwangi has under 20k, even though it has been in the game for a longer time. That tells you how incredibly rare it is to actually run into this ship. In fact, when I play the game myself, I run into this ship incredibly rarely, because basically no one is playing it. And that's because on paper, it doesn't really look that impressive. The HE DPM, 91k HE DPM, yikes, 2 turrets, same as Ognavoy's setup, no speed boost, which means you're already stuck doing, what, something like 36.5 knots, and you don't even have a speed boost to increase that speed either. So you're slow, you lack DPM, and keep in mind that your torpedoes are deep water. I should mention the AA is absolute trash, by the way, so don't even expect anything from the AA. You're not even going to scratch even a tier 6 carrier. So on paper the ship looks really unimpressive and really unattractive. The torpedoes are, however, kind of the kincher on this thing. They are the special aspect. I'm trying to get my team to support me. I'm hoping that Tallinn would push up and radar these, because 2 DDs in a smoke is very tempting, but he's probably too afraid of this quarter force. Regardless, these torpedoes, as I mentioned, these are the real gimmick of this ship, so to say, because even though they are deep water, which means I cannot torp any DDs, they are quite effective against surface targets. They're not that fast, 61 knots without any upgrades, but they do have a pretty decent alpha of over 17k. Or is it exactly 17k? It might actually be over 17k. But you get 10 of them and they hit like an absolute truck. And actually the alpha that you can put out in this thing is really, really impressive at 166k, which is the same as Kagero's alpha. So in terms of torpedo damage, sorry, 179k alpha. Oh, I'm talking out of mind. 179k alpha, which is actually more than what the Kagero can put out. So in terms of damage, your torpedo alpha is stronger than what the IGN DDs can put out. In return, well, you lose to him in HE DPM and of course in Concealment and all these other issues. But these torpedoes combined with the hydro and the smoke allows you to make some surprisingly sneaky plays. The issue is of course staying alive. It is not easy, especially when up tiered, but the somewhat faster smokes do enable you to smoke up when need be, and in this case just to deal some damage. I'm trying to get rid of this Kurfürst, so perhaps my team will play a bit more aggressively and we will get a bit more pressure in on this cap. We are in huge trouble though. We're already down 2 ships, we're down 500 to 320 points, and my team, if you look at the map, well, they are playing very, very scared indeed. I knew there were torps coming in. I'm popping hydro just to make sure there's no additional torps. I am radared. I checked to see, I start accelerating expecting it to be the Moskva, but I checked the Moskva, he's actually out of range, so I stopped shooting instantly because I know this is a Tallinn radar. And Tallinn, although he's able to stealth radar, the radar is short duration, but so as long as I don't shoot, I should be able to go undetected as soon as my bloom disappears. And that's exactly what happens, and I managed to go dark without losing too much health. Of course, when you have no heal and being forced out of my smoke, this always hurts, but we do survive. And that's something you really need to prioritize when playing Destroyer, especially when up-tiered. You might feel demoralized looking at a game like this when you're like, damn, it's like almost 8 minutes into the match and I still haven't landed a single torpedo in what is basically functionally a torpedo boat. But that's the thing, you can't give up. You can't just go, oh damn, there's no chance, we're never gonna win this, I have no chance of getting any damage, let's just try to YOLO someone to try to get something done. No, you just keep trying. And you keep trying, and you keep trying until the game is over. This game rewards patience. In almost all classes, this game rewards patience. Well, actually, I can't think of any class where patience isn't usually rewarded. There is a time to pushing in, there's a time for YOLO, but generally just being patient and waiting for the optimal opportunity will give you a significantly higher chance of dealing much more damage than you would expect. I call target on the Kurfürst, I tried to drop some deep water torps on him, but with 10 km range and with the Tallinn quite effectively zoning me out, I have to be really, really worried. I'm trying to get my team to focus him down because we really need kills at this point. We need points and we need kills, and I need to get rid of his oppressive German hydro, which is spotting these torpedoes from a mile away. Since they only do 61 knots, if they are spotted by hydro, they are fairly easy to evade. And of course I don't have any super narrow torpedoes either, and as mentioned, these torpedoes actually have a brutally long cooldown, even though the alpha is so high, 18k alpha, sorry, correction, 18k alpha on this, because the alpha is so high, in order for these to be somewhat balanced for the tier, the reload is a brutal 131 seconds without upgrades. So that means you're gonna wait a long time between torpedo volleys. This is no Holland or something similar, or European destroyer where you can just throw out torpedoes whenever you feel like it. The torpedoes have to be fairly calculated, and if you miss, which does happen, you're gonna be waiting a long time before you can launch them again. I keep providing vision for my team, trying to get my team to focus down the Tallinn, because he's the one who's zoning me out so heavily right now. Kurfürst takes down Summers. That's a pretty terrible trade, because now I'm the last DD alive. And looking at the map real fast, we can see that the enemy DD is a Holland. I mentioned that my DPM is something like 90k. Holland's DPM is over 200,000. So any fight with the Holland must be taken with the advantage of my consumables, and even then it's an uphill battle, because even if he's smoke firing me, he only needs to land half his shells and he's still doing more damage than I am. So it's a rough situation regardless. The Kurfürst finally gets taken down, and I start calling even more target on the Tallinn. At this point I'm worried that the Tallinn might be YOLOing around the island. Tallinn torpedoes are very, very effective, and I hope he will not be able to take down my Alsace. Regardless, I am finally able to contest this camp. the radar is going behind the island, there's no real threats, and hopefully the Holland has not arrived yet. Tallinn is actually doing exactly what I feared. He's going for the YOLO. I can only hope that my team combined can kill him before he gets away with it. Secondaries do take him down, but meanwhile we lose yet another ship. At this point we're down half our ships against the enemy's 7, and more importantly, even though I'm taking this cap, we're losing D, and the entire other flank of the map is completely gone. I take a glance at the enemy health pools, and they are basically all full HP. This ship is still a heavy uphill battle to climb. Even worse is that I've been using my hydros quite frequently, so I only have one hydro left, and I cannot afford to waste this on anything besides that potential fight with the Holland. I also need to be careful with my smokes, because as long as the Holland is undetected, he can pop up at any point, and as mentioned, you don't have speed boost, so if you look at my speed, we're doing what, 34? Climbing up to 35. As soon as I maneuver a bit, the speed goes down again. So this issue of speed, of only being able to do about 37. Oh, the speed flight, we're doing 37.5. That's actually pretty nice. Even 38 when going in a straight line. Of course, Holland running straight into you means that with him breaking your engine and just brutalizing you, that could be potentially dangerous. However, the Holland makes a mistake. He gets spotted on a minimap. At least I consider it a tactical mistake in any sort of situation where you're the last DD alive. Being spotted on a minimap lets the enemy know exactly where you are, even if they can't see your torps, and that means you can play differently. And in this case, as soon as I realize the Holland is dead, I start playing much more aggressively against this North Carolina, because I know the Holland is too far away to actually be a threat. So in general, in these situations, try to avoid being spotted, even if it might be juicy to deal some free damage around an island or whatever. The tactical advantage of not knowing where the enemy is, or not being known, is quite powerful. I go close enough to the NC. The reason I'm focusing this NC and not all the other ships here is not just Moskva's 12 km radar, but also the fact that I know for a fact that he has no Holland screening him, as there's potential on the other side, and also because he creates a rather nasty crossfire against my team right now. In fact, the rest of the enemy team is kind of bunched up between C and D, but this NC has the potential of creating a very nasty crossfire. So I'm trying to eliminate him as quickly as possible to open up that potential for my team, and of course, getting rid of him would make life so much easier. Sadly, he turns in, quite fortunately, just as my torpedoes are about to land, which means I only land a single torpedo, and we're looking at more than a minute of cooldown for the next volley, so we're gonna have to sit here for a long time to get rid of this North Carolina. I'm pinging the Thunder, trying to get him to focus this North Carolina, because broadside NC is at the Citadel. NC that just used his damage con against the flooding should be able to be burned to death very easily as well. Sadly, even though they do support me with some incoming fire, it doesn't really do a whole lot. That was the first torpedo we landed, by the way, all game in a torpedo boat, with what, 7-8 minutes remaining? That doesn't mean that that's all we're going to do this game. Patience tends to be rewarded in this game, provided you're not being too patient, and in that case I mean you're being too passive and your team is dying. My Alsace gets killed. We're down to 4 versus 5, because the Moskva gets himself killed as well. The problem, however, is we're still down points, and our only chance of contesting any caps is me. Even worse is B got contested. I doubt it's Mogami, because he should have been spotted, so I know the Holland is up there, which means now we can start playing more aggressive towards the center, hopefully provide some vision for my team, and hopefully getting some good torpedo angles on the remaining battleships. My torpedo reload finally came up, so I launch a volley on the North Carolina, hoping I can take him down. I do get RPF'd, which is a bit confusing to me, since the only place really, the RPF switches again, so that tells me there's something in the center of the map. Because if someone stole my RPF, it's got to be one of the ships north of me, so I'm switching RPF between one of those ships, and it's someone who's actually sailing north right now. Because if the enemy ship that RPF'd me would be sailing south, then I would still be RPF'd. So the only way that I could have been briefly RPF'd would have been if the ship, as you can see, was sailing north. Now as I'm closing the distance, I can actually triangulate his location based on what my team is doing. We take down the NC, but we're still behind a fair bit. The Republic is disengaging, which is a problem, but on the other hand, because he is playing so safe, it means that I can play aggressive. Even if I am being RPF'd by what I suspect might be either the Mogami or the Halland. The threat is not as large because my consumables are available and the Republic is running away. So I can smoke, I can hydro, I can probably disengage in case someone spots me right now. I'm keeping an eye out for any possible ships rushing me from behind islands, because that's what I would do if I had RPF on a target down here, as the other ships on my team are probably detected right now. It looks like the Republic is turning in. 4 minutes remaining. 800 to 740. We are down soon 100 points with only 4 minutes remaining. Their ship pools are very, very healthy, and I have the unenviable task of trying to take down a Holland somewhere around these islands. Zuma takes down my Smolensk. We're down even further. Trying to look for the juiciest target, and the Thunder is pushing into B, and I think the Izumo is actually tempted to angle against him. The problem is the Yamato is pushing from the south as well, which is nice in the sense that they're creating a crossfire, but it makes it hard for me to predict the Izumo's moves. I assume he's actually going to push and turn up north against the Thunder, because the Thunder is the closer target, and he will probably want to get behind this island that's in front of me, because he can use that island to angle against the Yamato. So that is my prediction. And that's exactly what the Izumo is doing. The second volley of torpedoes is probably not even going to be needed, because the first volley of torpedoes is looking to be absolutely textbook perfect. And that Izumo gets caught by full 5 out of 5, devastated and killed. I just saw torpedoes glancing north. I saw torpedoes heading towards the Thunder, which tells me that the Holland is actually up there in the north. And it is a priority for me to kill him off. My team can deal with the Republic, and as mentioned, I still have 1 minute of torpedo cooldown left, so I would just be a waste of time spending it down south. My goal is to prevent my Thunder from being torpedoed to death, and ideally catch the enemy off guard. I pop Hydra early, just to make sure that I won't get randomly torpedoed, as I'm going in between the Holland and the Thunder. Hydra pays off. I spot the torpedoes. I've spotted the Mogami as well, called target on him, and my team finished him off. So now we have 3 versus 2. The game has shifted, but I still have to catch this Holland. Ideally, I'm hoping he's too tunnel visioned on hunting down this Thunder that he doesn't expect me to be here. And I catch him nose in a 1 versus 1, which is exactly the situation I want. I quickly push up to 5 kilometers, and then I hit the brakes and smoke up. Well, I started smoking up early already, because now he's caught very, very deep in my Hydro. He could be going for blind fires, but it looks like he wants to go for a second set of torpedoes. But I just saw him launch both of them, so I know it's going to take him a couple seconds before he gets it off, and more importantly, I get to free farm him during this entire time. I keep pushing forward. I want to keep him within the Hydro range, and if he starts accelerating and turning away, which he's doing right now, I instantly accelerate out of the smoke and just keep the pressure on. I cannot allow this guy to disengage because there's only 1 minute left of the match. The Holland goes down. The problem is the enemy team is still generating points from 2 caps. If the Republic was smart enough to actually disengage, if it was smart enough to actually run earlier instead of pushing up into us, the enemy team would be victorious. But instead, he's picking a fight with the Thunder, a ship that does great HE damage against him, and the Yamato, a ship that overmatches him, and the results are to be expected. And with merely a few seconds left, we actually managed to turn this game into a victory. This game showed that even though the Siliwangi is very rare, it actually gains some power thanks to being so rare. People don't really know what to expect from it. You see it so rarely on the enemy team, you see it so rarely around. Hydro on the DD, I thought only the Germans had that. Luoyang used to be more popular, but Luoyang has kind of fallen off, so in general, when people see these Pan-Asian DDs, well, they expect deep water torp, sure. but they don't expect the Hydra at all. So it does have the, well, as you can see, I caught all three of the enemy DDs were caught off guard by this Hydra. None of them were expecting it. And those hard-hitting torpedoes, well, they sure caught a couple of people off guard as well. Over 2 million credits, thanks to the flags and the camo. And of course, if you look at the base stats, a very, very strong game. In fact, team score-wise, we got 3,300 base XP. And I was very fortunate this game that I had a competent Yamato on my team, something that does not happen often, and this really allowed me to help carry this game with him. And what I mean here is, if we look at the detailed report, something I didn't mention until this point, by not really sitting in smokes and constantly playing fairly forward, keeping the enemy within vision, I actually have 148,000 spotting damage. That is vision provided for my team, damage they could deal on the enemy thanks to the vision that I provided. And even though Wargaming sadly doesn't reward you with too much XP for this, it is highly important for winning matches. Only, what, 44,000 with the guns, even though that's basically all we did for roughly the first, 12 minutes of the match. That's when we landed our first torpedo. But then later on we landed multiple torpedoes and managed to recover not just the damage, but more importantly, the game as well. So this really is a lesson that a lot of the older ships that you might discard because they don't look that impressive, they can surprise in matches simply thanks to their rarity. Everyone knows what a Yamato does in World Warships. Everyone knows what a Montana does. People tend to know what a Shimakaze does as well. But then when you run into something like a Siliwangi, the vast majority of the player base is going to be scratching their heads. What the hell did that thing do again? And then they're going to be like, it's a tier 8, who cares? And then they lose the match. Right, let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. Right, as always, let's start with the equipment. Torpedo and turret survival, extremely important. Hydro duration, especially since you do get access to a fairly special hydro, since it does have 5.5 km range. Keep in mind that German DDs only have 5 km hydro, so if you're careful, you can actually kind of outplay them by parking within your smoke or outside of their smoke within 5.5 km range while staying out of their hydro. That will really mess with many German DDs because they are so used to having the hydro advantage, so when you turn it against them you tend to get the upper hand quite easily. Torpedo tubes modifier, giving that a 5% speed, which bumps it up to 65 knots. Acceleration, because if caught in smokes you need to get the hell out and quickly, especially important when radared, as you saw multiple times in the previous game. And finally concealment, so you can push up and use that hydro effectively. Captain build wise, priority target, last stand, survivability expert, and concealment expert. I do love Adrenaline Rush, but you should probably get torpedo armament first. Note that in this build I'm actually preferring to use BFT plus preventive maintenance instead of radiolocation. Now there are reasons for this. RPF is in my opinion a fantastic ability, but generally speaking when you're picking fights with other DDs you can use your consumable combination to gain the advantage, which means that even though RPF is a great skill, when you actually are forced to take these fights, preventive maintenance, giving your turret so much more life, as well as BFT bumping up that reload by 10% does help you a fair bit, because as I mentioned, your HE DPM is horrendously anemic. That doesn't mean that you can't skip both of these and just go for the RPF build as well. That is the standard torpedo boat build and it is good. But keep in mind that the Siliwangi, because of that hydro smoke combination, it does want to gunfight other DDs whenever it does it on its own terms, which means within its consumables. So when that does happen, BFT tends to give me more of an advantage than RPF. Flag-wise, it's pretty straightforward. The combat flags are the usual: fire and flooding, detonation, speed, and faster consumables. What was the speed exactly? 38.3 knots. Wow. Keep in mind that's without a speed boost, of course. CN Young is capable of reaching the very same 39.4, plus you can add speed boost on top of it. So not your standard Pan-Asian destroyer. This thing is quite slow and quite vulnerable when caught in the open. Generally speaking, the Siliwangi, you never want to fight with this ship in the open. You always want to fight on your own terms. Sadly, thanks to radars and other fast ships and different consumables, this doesn't always work out, but that should always be your goal. Fight on your own terms. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this little commentary on a ship that you generally don't see much these days. I'll talk to you guys later. I hope you guys enjoyed it.